in mercy. For his great love wherewith he loved. That's the basis that Paul is approaching these admonitions. That you've crossed over that. You were sinners going a different route, and now the great love and grace of God has changed your life. You become new creations in Christ Jesus. Paul says that in another place, 2 Corinthians. Old things are passed away, all things become new. In other words, I'm not expected to act like I used to act. But we do sometimes. All of us. We go back into the old, that doesn't mean we lose our salvation, but we go back into the old ruts. What the lost person would do. Sometimes we do. So Paul's approaching this, an admonition about unity in chapter 4. I think we have unity here. You know, in a family there are disagreements all the time. You learn to maintenance those things, or else you're not together. You have to maintain a family unit. Same thing with a church. Maintenance. Like I said, life throws you curves. Some situations make you feel helpless and maybe sometimes hopeless. You know, but it's always, this is a comforting thing, it's always for a purpose when it comes to God's children. What do you mean? Well, isn't there a purpose with lost people? Well, they don't get it. Their life is not really purposeful. It's not fulfilling a purpose except to be lost. That's the word lost with all that goes with it, lost. Your life is lost. What's the point of that? You're not going to be in eternity in heaven. You're not going to be remembered in them. So that's the whole, I don't want to get preaching on that, but the whole idea of lost is not just going to hell. Lost. Lost your whole life. Just lost. I don't care if you're the President of the United States. I don't care if you're what you are, richest person in the world. It's all lost once you stop living. And it could be 60, it could be 70, it could be 80. It's lost. It's all lost. I don't think we get that. But when you're saved, it's purposeful. Your life has a purpose, and you'll be remembered. You're going to be in heaven. Your book's in the Lamb's Book of Life in indelible ink. That's why you're so strategic for life here. You are lights. Don't take Jesus' words lightly. I don't mean that play on words, but you are lights. You are the salt of the earth. That is so strategic. So what you say to us, what you say to individuals, what you do, your impact is so important. And Paul is preaching this message or writing this message from that perspective. You are strategic. You're precious in God's sight. There's much advice to Christians in the Bible, and we don't have time to go through the whole Bible and talk about in the Old Testament that is still apropos for any dispensation, and in the New Testament as well. But I want to encourage you this morning with regard to your purpose. No matter what happens in your life, and it's so easy to stand up and say this, and do you always act this way? No. You know that. I got a suit on, got a tie on, doesn't mean I always do that. But I'm preaching. This is admonition. This is an encouragement for us all to do this, to do it more. Someone said, I was a young pastor, 23, my first pastorate, and I asked a man, I would go visiting and visit a lot of people that didn't know the Lord in that area, Hartsville, South Carolina. And I asked this man, and he was angry about something. I don't know, just angry at the church. And he said, I don't go to church. It's full of hypocrites. I said, that's what church is for, hypocrites. So we come to church and learn how not to be so much hypocritical. So we learn not to be as much a hypocrite this week as we were last week. That's what it's for. I said, a lot of times I'm a hypocrite. I told him that. I'm a hypocrite. Because I'll say one thing and do another. That's why I need church. That's why I need somebody saying, don't do that anymore. Because we love you. Don't do that anymore. So let's get to the message. Back to the message. That was a commercial. Ephesians 4, 1 through 4, quickly. Paul's a prisoner, and there's not much of an outline to this. I'm going to talk about walking walking worthily. But just a general talk to you this morning about encouragement. Paul is talking from the perspective, you think you have it bad. Paul was in prison. Now, it was a house arrest. It wasn't as bad as the second imprisonment. This is the first imprisonment. He writes Colossians and Philippians and Ephesians, and he tags on Philemon as a little personal note, and he sends it off. But he's from Rome. But this is from Rome, but it's a house arrest. But he's a prisoner. How long have you served in prison? And he's just released for about a year after this imprisonment, just a year. That's when he writes 1 Timothy and Titus. In the second imprisonment, he writes 2 Timothy, and he knows it's over. So he only has about a year after this of freedom. Then he goes back to prison. This time he knows that the time of my departure is at hand. He knows it's over. How many of you living in the light of you knowing it's right down the road? And sometimes you have cancer, and sometimes it's terminal. You might know that. But I'm talking about as a result of others doing something to you very bad. Rome's going to do something very bad to Paul. They're going to kill him. So Paul is facing reality that you and I don't face so many times. We're going home not with the prospect of somebody going to kill us in a couple years, not with death sentence hanging over our head or being jumped and ambushed like Paul was, or beatings on the back with scars he could show you down deep into the flesh where they ripped it apart. Not many of us talking from that perspective can say that in this room. So I understand that as an American citizen living in freedoms and comforts that, this guy never experienced in this life. So he's writing from that perspective, so I get that. So he says, as a prisoner, I beg you that you walk worthily of the calling. Walk like you're saved. Wow. Walk like you have once, you were sinners, but by the mercies of God, you're not anymore. So walk like you know that, and you're living in that grace. So he says, walk that way. Walk. I did a paper one time. I used the word walk, and the professor said, now I want you to go back and give me some first century usages of that word peripateo in the Greek text, extra biblical. I had to go back and find how people in those days, Greek writers not in the Bible, would use that word. And it came out that most of the time they use that word peripateo, and para, walk. Para means around, pateo means to walk. And so the etymology of the word is to walk around, which the idea is, and I think, to live every day. To act like Monday is Sunday. I don't mean that in the old-fashioned sense of legalism, but act like you're with the Lord, and you're not with the Lord here today and not with the Lord tomorrow. Don't get me wrong. You don't come to church to meet the Lord. Now, when the Lord was in the Old Testament, you would come and he would be representative in the temple, but you don't meet the Lord here. He follows you home. You're in the presence of the Lord everywhere you go. Your car is the Holy of Holies. Your kitchen is the Holy of Holies. God is not present here and absent when you go outside. So when you're walking worthy of the Lord, that means you're cognizant of the fact that you're in his presence everywhere you go. So Paul is saying, I want you to walk like it. I'm talking to you as a prisoner. I want you to walk like it. Live up to your name. I told you this story over and over again, but a dear friend of mine is going to be with the Lord. Doctor, honey, help me with this. He really was impressed with this illustration. And he told me about 10 years after I used it in the sermon. He was one of my professors. He said, Wayne, I want to tell you, when you said that really impacted me. And I can't think of his name. It'll come to me. It's out there floating as I can almost see it. I went down to the store. Billy has a grandpa's store, and we used to, as kids, would go around and listen to these. Well, come there to the store and sit on the Coca-Cola crate and listen to these old men tell tales. And people knew each other. They still do in Caswell County. They know who I am. I go down and preach to Shiloh, and they know who I am and all about me. A man without honor except in his own country, but I do have some honor there. and it's really good to go back because everybody's a cousin. You know, say we had a big crowd in Shiloh. Everybody else was, you know, my first cousin, second cousin, once removed. I don't know what that means. But anyway, I went back to that store when I was a young man. And I was coming out of Grandpa's store, and I was walking by a man sat back, and I think it was a bench there then. They had moved up. There's an old wooden bench, and a man sitting there, and I walked by him. He said, "Hey, you're George Willis's boy, aren't you?" I said, "How'd you know?" He said, "Well, you sort of walk like it." Now, wouldn't that be something if they'd say, "You're a believer, aren't you?" How'd you know? Well, you sort of walk like it. You know Christ, don't you? Well, how do you know? Well, you sort of walk like it. That would be a compliment, wouldn't it? You remind me of the Lord? Good, all right. And that's what Paul means, walk around, not just Sunday, but every day of the week, which is very hard. Nobody's saying this is easy. Nobody's saying, well, who can do that? Well, you're supposed to. You're right. Am I right? You're supposed to. I'm supposed to. But I want to encourage you. So how do you face? I'll get to it. So it's Paul's admonition. Walk, which means, and you know, how? Well, listen. How do you do that? These are Christian graces. And the biggest challenge in me, and I've been preaching since I was 16. 16. And I've found through the rigors of preaching that most of my messages, as a local church pastor is, and I've looked at them, most of them has turned out to be that way. And some are more evangelistic. They preach the gospel and more evangelistic, revivalist. But mine's been in the context of the church setting. Most of my messages have been begging people who are believers to live like it. Me included. Admonishing, using illustrations, telling jokes, whatever you do in a sermon, to encourage believers to act like more that they are what they say they are. Isn't that a wonderful environment to be in? If all the Christian graces were on display, me included, and they were on display for somebody to walk in this building and all the Christian graces are there in every believer. Wouldn't that be something? So Paul says, how do you do this? No matter what happens to you, no matter what happens in life, you do this. That's your defense. No matter what happens, no matter what news that come your way in the doctor's office, and I'm preaching this, and I always practiced, and really I've been hit low many times, no matter if you have bad news about a loved one, no matter what comes your way, no matter what news, how do you face it? And this is what I've come to, and I believe it's correct. I'm not a philosopher, but you've got to be strong on the inside. You can take care of what you can take care of because you can't control others. Am I right? You can't control situations. You can't control news. You can't even control diseases in your body. But when it happens, you can't control this, your attitude toward the Lord and your graces that are demonstrated before Him. You can't control decisions about you on the inside. And dedication to Him. Those are heart things. That word, Larry, reasonable service, that's an inward decision. By your reasonable service, a soul decision. I beseech you, brother, by the mercy of God, you present your bodies to Christ, but which is your reasonable service. Or it says in the King James, but it really means your soul, your decision you make on the inside. You can control that. And so, what about the Christian graces? What? Lowliness, which means humility, being humble. I don't deserve to be up here preaching. I don't deserve any of the grace of God that is given to me. Sometimes you might think so because you're spoiled, or I'm spoiled. You know, I was spoiled by Mom and Dad after Jen Lee was killed, and I know that. Jen Lee was killed in an accident, and I know that. And I know they poured everything. Daddy went out and got me bought me a car as a freshman, he said it's going to be a Mustang, but he showed up with a new Volkswagen. my friends put on there, I think it was Joe Walker put on there, changed the title on it, puts on Mustang, Wayne's Mustang. But that was a new car. And, those 2 years at high school, Mom and Dad just spoiled me. I knew that. They had a Thunderbird. Dad had a Thunderbird. Let me drive it to school. Let me drive the Thunderbird. 1959 Thunderbird. Was I forget what color. I think it was kind of like turquoise. It was shiny, sporty, and the girls, wow, you drive a sports car. Drive them like you're somebody. I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve that. Mom and Dad loved me, but I was spoiled. They gave me money one time. I won't tell you, but they gave me money. This is early. I was spoiled all the way anyway. And they gave me money one time. They gave me this allowance, and I always wanted to spend it. I always wanted to spend money. I don't know what about me. And I wasn't like I'm hungry for money. I wanted the things. I didn't have the love of money at all. Just the things it could buy. I remember, Mom and Dad always reminded me when I was a little boy, we'd drive along, and I said, Mom, I want to get this or something I wanted to get. No, you can't have that, Wayne. Well, I wanted to get that. Then I saw a man over there on the road, and I said, well, y'all just pull over and let me give this man that money because I can't spend it. It's not doing me any good. I was a spoiled brat. Dad would look at me and smile. I don't deserve anything. And you live a life understanding it's all because of Christ that you're what you are. And sometimes you learn that later in life. I did that through Jenna Lee. I did that through Gina. I did that through my cancer, through the heart attack. And you learn you're nothing without Him. Right? And His love on you. He thinks you're precious. He loves you more than you love yourself. He does for you more than you could ever do for yourself. So that's that walk. You live in that. It's like gravy. You're living in that humility gravy. Humility.